Director James Mangold has signed an overall deal with Paramount to develop and direct and produce movies for the studio. James Mangold is an extremely talented director. You might know him for his movie Logan. He did also direct A Complete Unknown, the Timothée Chalamet Bob Dylan biopic, which was huge at the Oscars. James Mangold is really talented and really highly sought after, which a lot of folks have some confusion as to what this means for some of the different movies that he has in development. Because famously, James Mangold should be working with both Warner Discovery and with Disney and Lucasfilm. It was announced that James Mangold was going to be working on a Swamp Thing movie. James Gunn announced a Swamp Thing film as part of the DC Studios Gods and Monsters initial lineup that they were working on. And we did also get the announcement a few years ago that James Mangold was going to be working on a Star Wars movie. Mangold's movie was going to be about the origin of the Jedi Order, or the first Jedi Knight. It was going to be a biblical epic that was going to be 25,000 years before any of the movies. It was going to be the full origin of the Force. That being said, we now have an overall deal with Paramount going on. So we haven't heard about James Mangold's Star Wars movie since the initial announcement in 2023. We have not heard about James Mangold's Swamp Thing movie since it was announced a few years back in 2022. So is he still developing these movies? Unsure. James Gunn is pretty candid about the movies that are in development over at DC Studios, and I don't believe Swamp Thing has been brought up recently. And with all the reshuffling going on with Star Wars following the rise and fall of their streaming era, who's to say whether or not they're still exploring this movie? Having an overall deal with Paramount would not stop James Mangold from creating these movies, especially if he was already contractually signed on to write and direct. That being said, it does mean that James is probably still working on other things and still going to keep moving on. I'm curious to know, would you rather see James Mangold do an original film, Swamp Thing, or Star Wars Origin of the Force? I think of those, selfishly, I would probably say the Star Wars, because a Ten Commandments, biblical style, biblical epic, Lawrence of Arabia style massive Star Wars movie from the guy who did Logan, that sounds pretty sick. I'm not gonna lie.